Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into a really foundational document for anyone working with IT governance. It's the COBIT 2019 framework, Introduction and Methodology. We've got it right here. And our mission really is to crack open two key chapters, crucial stuff for actually using COBIT. We're talking Chapter 6 on performance management. How do you measure if your governance is working? And Chapter 7, designing a tailored governance system, making sure it fits your organization, not just some generic model. Think of this as getting the practical steps you need after you grasp the basics, moving from the what to the how well, and importantly, how to make it yours.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we talked about the foundational bits, the components. These chapters, though, this is where we get into the mechanics, assessment, customization. It's really the bridge from theory to practice. It helps you measure how you're doing and build something that's, actually effective for you. We'll go through them section by section, just like in the document.
Okay, great. Let's unpack Chapter 6 first then. Performance management. Why is this so fundamental in COBIT?
Well, you can have the best governance system designed on paper, right? But if you don't know how well it's actually performing, how the different pieces are working, where the weak spots are, you're basically flying blind. Performance management is really the engine for improvement. It gives you that feedback loop, tells you if your governance efforts are paying off, and where you need to focus to get better. The source calls it COBIT Performance Management, or CPM. It covers things like capability and maturity levels.
Got it. So it's the reality check, asking, is this actually working? And I see the framework lists some core principles for CPM. What are those?
Yes, there are 5 key principles they emphasize for good CPM. First, simple. It has to be simple to understand and use. Overly complex systems just don't get used effectively.
Okay.
Second, consistent with the overall COBIT model. So it needs to work for measuring all component types, processes, structures, information, the lot.
Right.
Across the board. Third, reliable. The results have to be reliable, repeatable, relevant. You need data you could actually trust and use.
Makes sense.
Fourth, flexible. It needs to be adaptable because, different companies have different priorities, different needs. What matters most varies.
Fair.
And finally, supportive. It should support various kinds of assessments, internal checks, self-assessments for improvement, right up to formal audits.
Simple, consistent, reliable, flexible, supportive.
Okay. That sounds like a solid foundation for measurement itself. So how does COBIT actually structure this? It's not just one big score, is it?
No, definitely not. The CPM model, it aligns with and kind of extends ideas from CMMI Development v2.0. The main structure is built around levels. For individual processes, you measure their capability using capability levels. Now, the details are in another COBIT guide, but the concept's introduced here. The framework does mention that maybe in the future, capability levels could apply to other things, like structures or info items.
Oh, okay.
But right now, the really fleshed out approach is for processes. Then separate from that, you have maturity levels. These are higher level. They apply to focus areas.
Focus areas, like specific topics. Exactly. Collections of related objectives and components. Think cybersecurity or maybe risk management or DevOps. And the key link is to achieve a certain maturity level for a focus area, all the processes within that area have to hit the corresponding capability level.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Okay, that distinction is crucial. Capability for one process, maturity for a whole subject area. Let's zoom in on process capability first. Levels 0 to 5. Can you walk us through those? What do they mean in practice?
Yeah, it's based on CMMI. Helps you see how well a process is really embedded. Level 0 is incomplete. Basically, the process isn't really happening, or it's so patchy it doesn't achieve its purpose. No real capability there.
Okay, starting from nothing.
Level 1 is performed. The process gets done, it achieves its purpose, but it's pretty chaotic, ad hoc, intuitive, maybe an incomplete set of activities. No real organization.
Just getting it done somehow.
Level 2, managed. Now, this is a significant step up. It still achieves its purpose, but it's planned, it's monitored. You're using organizational resources deliberately. It's much more organized, often well-defined.
Getting organized.
Level 3 is defined. Now we're talking enterprise-wide standards. The process follows a standard approach across the organization. Performance might be measured. Focus on improvement starts here. Correction. Actually, the text says level 3 is more basic. It achieves its purpose using a basic yet complete set of performed activities. Let's stick to that.
Okay. So level 3 is consistently performed using a complete set of activities.
Right. Then level 4 is quantitatively managed. So the process is well-defined, and its performance is measured using quantitative data. You're data-driven, making decisions based on numbers.
Data-driven performance.
And level 5, optimizing. You've got level 4, plus you're actively using that data for continuous improvement. Always looking to fine-tune, get better, optimize the process.
Okay, that makes sense. A clear progression from chaos to continuous improvement. And you mentioned it's not always a simple pass-fail for achieving a level.
Exactly. For formal audits, maybe, but for internal use improvement, the framework suggests using ratings, like
Yes.
fully achieved at over 85%,
Hmm.
largely between 50 and 85%, partially 15 to 50%, or not less than 15%.
Ah, okay.
This gives you a much better feel for how close you are, helps prioritize where to put your effort. It's still subjective based on evidence, but more nuanced.
Right. Helps focus the improvement work. Okay, now let's switch back to maturity levels. For those focus areas, how do they differ from process capability?
Maturity levels give you that broader picture. It's about the overall performance of a whole collection of related components focused on a specific area, like risk or security. The levels themselves, 0 to 5, they kind of mirror the CMMI ideas again. Incomplete, initial, managed, defined, quantitative, optimizing, but applied to the whole focus area. So level 2 means the focus area is managed, planning happens, but maybe not standardized across the enterprise yet. Level 3 means there are enterprise-wide standards guiding that whole area.
And the critical link you mentioned.
Yes, the crucial point is to claim, say, maturity level 3 for the information security focus area, all the individual processes within that focus area must have achieved at least capability level 3.
Wow, okay, so it really forces consistency across related processes. You can't just be good at one or two things.
Exactly. It sets a pretty high bar for claiming maturity in a whole area.
Now, COBIT 2019 specifically mentions managing performance for other components too, not just processes. That seems like a big step. How do you measure things like, say, organizational structures or information quality?
Yeah, this is definitely an area where COBIT 2019 expanded things. It acknowledges governance isn't just about processes. Now, for these other components, the methods aren't always as formalized or universally agreed upon as they are for processes, like CMMI, but the framework gives pointers. For organizational structures, think committees, roles, teams. You could assess them based on how well they actually perform the process activities they're supposed to be responsible for.
Makes sense. Are they doing their job?
Right. Or do they follow good practices? Like,
Hmm.
does the committee have a clear documented mandate? Do they meet regularly? Are decision rights clear? Escalation paths defined? You could also look at whether the structure itself is well managed. Does it have objectives? Is it performance monitored? Does it get evaluated? Enterprises might need to define their own specific checklists here.
Okay, so more qualitative criteria, perhaps. What about information items, like reports or data records?
For information, it suggests looking at quality criteria. It actually points back to the COBIT 5 information model, which had a good breakdown. Criteria fall into 3 groups. Intrinsic quality things like accuracy, objectivity, relevance, completeness, timeliness.
The actual quality of the data itself.
Exactly. Then contextual quality, how it's presented. Is it concise, consistent, easy to understand, easy to work with?
How useful it is in context.
Right. And finally, security, privacy, accessibility. Is it available when needed? Is access restricted appropriately? You'd assess a specific information item against the criteria that matter most for its purpose.
Interesting. And culture and behavior. That sounds tricky to measure.
It is definitely less tangible. But the idea is to define what good governance behavior looks like in a particular context.
Right.
What are the desirable behaviors? What are the undesirable ones?
Yeah.
You could potentially assign capability levels to these defined behaviors. The framework mentions that the separate governance and management objectives guide actually defines aspects of culture and behavior related to most objectives.
Ah, so there's a starting point there.
Yes, it gives you something to work with. Future focus area guidance might provide even more detail on desired behaviors for specific topics.
That's fascinating. It really paints a picture of COBIT looking at the whole ecosystem processes, yes, but also the structures, the information flowing through it, and the people, the culture.
Precisely. Effective governance depends on all those pieces working well together. You need to measure them all somehow.
Okay, let's shift gears then. Moving into Chapter 7. Designing a tailored governance system. First question, why tailor? Isn't COBIT supposed to be this comprehensive framework? Why not just implement it as is?
That's a really important question. COBIT is comprehensive. It's generic. But that's also why you must tailor it. Think about it. Every single enterprise is different. Different strategies, different goals, different industries, regulations, size, risk appetite, technology choices. The list goes on.
Right, huge variation.
Exactly. So taking a one-size-fits-all generic framework and trying to force it onto your unique situation, it just won't work well. It'll be inefficient, probably ineffective, maybe way too complicated in some areas and not strong enough in others.
It wouldn't fit.
Precisely. It wouldn't fit. That's where design factors come in. These are the characteristics of your specific enterprise context that you use to guide the tailoring process, to customize COBIT for you.
Design factors. We talked about those being a core concept. The source says they impact the design in different ways. How so?
Yes, the framework highlights three main kinds of impact these design factors have on your governance system design. Figure 7.1 illustrates this. First, they impact management objective priority or selection. Certain factors make some governance and management objectives way more important for your enterprise than others.
Okay, prioritizing objectives.
Right. And that priority usually translates into setting higher target capability levels for those key objectives. For instance, the source gives examples. If your strategy is all about competitive products, then managing the IT portfolio becomes critical. Or if you're very risk-averse or face a high-threat environment, guess what? Objectives around risk management and security jump way up the priority list. You want higher capability there.
Makes perfect sense.
The strategic role of IT is another big one. If IT is core to your strategy, objectives about managing IT strategy itself, managing relationships, developing skills, they all become more important.
Okay, so prioritizing objectives based on context. What's the second impact?
The second is component variation. Design factors can change how important specific components are or even require variations within those components, like organizational structures. A small company, an SME, will likely need fewer, less formal roles and committees than a giant multinational. The SME focus area guidance actually describes this.
Right, simpler structure.
Or think regulations, a highly regulated industry that puts a huge emphasis on documented policies, procedures, maybe specific compliance roles.
Sure.
Your IT methods matter too, using DevOps. That requires specific tweaks to activities, structures, maybe even culture, especially within processes for building and operating solutions.
So the components themselves might need to look different. And the third impact?
The third points to the need for specific focus areas. Some design factors are so significant, their impact is so profound that you really need a whole variant of the core COVID model. That's where focus areas come in. DevOps is a good example again. If you're adopting DevOps principles, you'll likely need the specific guidance found in the DevOps focus area, which modifies several core processes. And the SME example fits here too. The characteristic of small and medium enterprises often require a less burdensome, tailored approach described in its own focus area guidance.
So, to sum up the impacts, design factors tell you which objectives matter most, how the individual components might need adjusting, and if you need to grab a specific flavor of COBIT, like for SMEs or DevOps.
You got it. That's the essence of how they guide tailoring.
So that covers the why and the what of tailoring, but how do you actually do it? What's the process?
The framework lays out a pretty clear four-stage workflow. Figure 7.2 shows this. Stage 1 is understand the enterprise context and strategy. This is foundational. Understand the business strategy, the enterprise goals, the risk profile, and critically, what are the current INT-related problems or issues?
Okay, get the big picture first.
Stage 2, determine the initial scope of the governance system. You start narrowing it down based on Stage 1. Consider the strategy. Use the COBIT goals cascade with your enterprise goals to identify relevant IT objectives, factor in the risk profile, and those current INT issues.
Starting to shape it.
Stage 3, refine the scope. Now you bring in more design factors to fine-tune. Consider the threat landscape, compliance needs, the role IT plays strategically, your sourcing model, in-house, outsourced, cloud, your implementation methods, agile, DevOps, your tech adoption strategy, are you a pioneer or a follower, and your enterprise size.
Adding more detail, more context.
Exactly. Then Stage 4, conclude the governance system design. This has two key steps. First, resolve inherent priority conflicts. Because you've looked at so many factors, they might pull you in different directions. You need to consciously decide how to balance those conflicts.
The balancing act.
Right. And the final step is to actually conclude the design. Based on everything considered, you make the case-by-case decisions. What are the prioritized objectives? What are the target capability levels? What specific component variations or focus areas are needed? This results in your tailored design.
Wow, okay. That's quite a structured process. Understand context, initial scope, refine with details, then resolve conflicts and finalize. It seems very methodical.
It is. It's designed to guide you through those complex considerations and arrive at a defensible set of recommendations for your specific governance system. It's not just guesswork.
And the source mentions this design process links up with the broader COBIT implementation guide.
Yes, there's a brief mention and a figure showing the connection. Essentially, these 4 design stages, understand, determine scope, refine scope, conclude, design, they map, onto the early phases of the implementation guide. They help answer the big implementation questions. What are the drivers? Where are we now? And critically, where do we want to be? So designing the system is a key part of figuring out your implementation roadmap.
Right, you have to design it before you can build it and run it.
Exactly.
So pulling these two chapters, 6 and 7, together, we see COBIT providing not just the building blocks, but also the ruler performance management to measure how well they're working, and the blueprint, the design process to make sure you build the right structure for your specific situation using those design factors.
Precisely. It moves beautifully from the what the components to the how well performance management and the how to make it yours. Tailored design. And neither of these is static, right? Performance management drives continuous improvement. And the design shouldn't be a one-off. As your enterprise context, those design factors change over time. You might need to revisit and adjust the design.
That's a great point. It leads to a final thought, though. Given that the design process involves balancing potentially conflicting factors and performance management, especially for things like culture or structures, involves some level of judgment. How does an organization really ensure they've got genuine buy-in and confidence in both the tailored design and the ongoing performance results beyond just saying, we followed the COBIT steps? Something for you, the listener, to think about in your own context. Join us next time for another deep dive.